Assalamu alaikum everyone, and welcome back to our next topic which we are going to study today. As you can see on the board, the word is written for you is macroeconomics. So macroeconomics is one of the branches of economics. When we talk about economics, basically there are two branches, one of them known as microeconomics and one of them is the macroeconomics. The microeconomics actually deals with all the economic problems faced by an individual. All those economic issues which are related to any individual, it could be a consumer, it can be a producer, it can be any factor of production like a labor, it can be of any individual which we are talking about, maybe a firm. So the microeconomics has been discussed with all these topics. And now the remaining part of our economics syllabus is relying on this, that is macroeconomics. Now, what is macroeconomics? When we talk about the micro, that deals with the small parts. Micro stands for the small. When we talk about the macro, we are actually talking about economic issues which are on the bigger level. So macro is a big, when we translate it in the real sense, it's like discussing economic problem in a bigger issues. Now, what are the bigger issues and bigger economic problem? And whose problem is this actually? So when we're talking about this macroeconomics, we're talking about that the big issues are of an economy. So it includes all the producers, it includes all the consumers, it includes every person or a large number of people who actually can be addressed with their economic problem. So let's highlight that what are those big problems. So macroeconomics is actually, when we talk about its problems first, or maybe if we just start with its objectives, so we can either discuss with the problems or either we discuss with the objective. So if we talk from the aims or objective point of view, we are going to find out the macroeconomics is all about looking into low or stable prices. The very first aim which comes before us is low or stable prices. Now everybody likes that prices in the economy should be low or at least stable for a long time. So their incomes could be managed enough and they can have a maximum well-being. So having a low or stable prices means that actually we are talking about that how the inflation can be controlled. So this is first and the foremost objective which we can understand. Okay, the second thing which comes before us is that how we can focus that the country's economic growth could be enhanced to achieve a higher economic growth. Okay, so most of the countries who are facing a low economic growth means where they have a lesser number of output produced, so it's going to create more economic problems, having lesser choice of goods and services. So to address that, the government will always have its target to achieve the macroeconomic objectives, and they will always try to achieve a higher economic growth. So every country's main economic objective from the macro point of view is to enhance more goods and services. That is ultimately known as economic growth. Along with this, people would also like to have a higher or full employment. This is the third objective which macroeconomics is going to discuss, and higher or full employment. If we don't find full, at least the higher employment is going to be our objective. Like people, if they are employed, they can fulfill their wants, they can fulfill their needs. So that means this is going to be a macroeconomic problem for most of the people in an economy. A country like Pakistan, when people, they are unemployed, this is going to create more economic problem for them. So it's not going to be only one or two people, or maybe people belong to a particular area. We are talking about the people having jobs around the nation in the whole economy. So that is going to be addressed as your objective as macroeconomics, that we are actually targeting about a higher or a full employment. So this is the third in our list of the macroeconomics. Now, apart from that, we are going to find out that how this economic growth and this full employment and this low stability of prices can also address our international relation of economics. How we are good in terms of showing a better economic performance in terms of addressing our international trade. And when we are talking about the international trade, we are actually concerned with the balance of payment. So another target in the macroeconomics is going to be to have a or correction of balance of payment. When we talk about the correction of balance of payment, we are talking about when the balance of payment is either surplus or either it's deficit. Either we are facing loss or either we are earning or gaining more benefits. So to balance that out, the balance of payment is going to be our next target. And this is not a small, again, it's again a bigger issue of economics. So it's come under the umbrella of macroeconomics. Apart from that, some economists do say that actually when the macroeconomics is going on, we are discussing about all the resources which are going to be allocated, and that should be addressing as a whole economy. So one of the most important, apart from all these, is how to have or remove or eradicate poverty, or in other words, how we can have an even distribution of income or wealth. While we are producing, some may be suffering with a low income and some will be earning very high. When we are talking about the market economy, this is one of the disadvantages. So in macroeconomics, we are going to discuss those people who are suffering with the poverty or they're living below the poverty line, and how we can evenly distribute the income. That is going to be another objective of the macroeconomics. Okay, apart from that, there can be some other like looking after the demerit goods. That is also one of our concern. Looking after how we can control the pollution in an environment, that can be another objective, which can be discussed under the macroeconomics. Okay, now just let's sum up that what we are actually talking about today. We are actually showing you a picture that the macroeconomics is actually standing on these 4 or 5 pillars. The macroeconomics is all interrelated. And this is what we are going to find in our upcoming sections. And all these sections are going to speak up that how one, when it is going to be achieved, the other may get adverse effect. Like correcting one side will give a reverse action on the other one. Like maybe if we are going to stabilize the prices or lower the prices, maybe in this way, we are going to find a low employment. We're going to face more unemployment in the economy. How come? That is something which is going to be our future discussion. Right now, I'm just giving you an overview of macroeconomics. This is the second branch of your economic subject, and that only suggests that how the larger economic problems can be highlighted, those which are related at large, which are addressing a larger proportion of the economy. So studying economics as a whole economy is known as macroeconomics. And who is actually the person who's going to look after it? And in very simple words, whom this problem actually belongs to. It actually belongs to the people of the economy. But whose actual problem is this? The main concern for these is the government. And usually they say that the macroeconomics is actually the economics of the government as well. So usually whenever somebody says that what are the government aims of economics. So we are actually talking about the macroeconomic objectives or macroeconomic aims. And there you are, we have highlighted all those areas and objectives before you. So now, how to start and learn this? This is the biggest question right now, because macroeconomics is something which is interrelating. All these are interrelated. Now, it's very surprising that how it could be interrelated with each other. So for that, we need to learn them first, that how the prices are existing, why we would see a higher prices or unstable prices, why we would face an unemployment, why we would see a downward trend in the economic growth, why we would see that there is more uneven distribution of income, and why we would see that there is more a disequilibrium in the balance of payment. Whenever these things are happening in an economy, we need to learn its reasons first. So we cannot learn them all together in one session. So what we are going to do, we are going to start up from somewhere from any one of these objectives. So for your ease, I'm going to start this with higher economic growth. Now, we can start economics from any of these variables. If you just go and see the textbook, you will find that they start with the macroeconomic aims and they immediately start some terminologies which really gives trouble to many students. So there should be a way which we need to devise to understand it very well, because sometimes it's narrated in a very complex way that it makes difficult for some students, that they don't find it easy to interrelate. That is the main focus, that how these all economic variables or these economic problems interrelate, and how we can have a solution while taking all the objectives together, and how we can fulfill our maximum satisfaction. So for that, we have to start from somewhere. So what I'm starting with is with the higher economic growth, and there are going to be some prerequisites which we are going to start with. So let's start from some of those prerequisites concepts from where we are going to start macroeconomics. So we are going to start today from the macroeconomics, from a basic concept that how actually the economy works. So for that, how the economy works. So I'm starting with a very simple concept. This concept is just like the starting and for the beginners, for all those who are new to the economics. So let's see how the economy actually works. And then we are going to add up all those concepts which are related to our syllabuses. If I would start with the aggregate demand and aggregate supply, how their shapes and curves actually behave, this is going to be a little more stereotype, that we are going to at least memorize it. We are not going to learn it, but I want all of you to learn it first. So for that, you really need to know what is the foundation of this concept. So starting with an economy, that how the economy actually works. Now in the economy, we must remember that there are actually three participants. Last time I did mention in one of my lessons that economy have three different participants, those who belong to the economic society. One of them is known as consumers, second is producers, and the third one is government. You can figure this out. Out of these three, you don't find any fourth person in the economic society, which exists and which doesn't have any economic problem. So all of them have the economic problem. So now I'm going to extend it with today's topic again, how economy works. So we're starting with the two participants first. One of them is consumers and the other one is producers. So we give them some new names this time. For consumer, we take a name as households. So household is our one participant of this economy. And we are going to find out that how economy actually works. On the other end, we have firms. I hope that these terms are not that difficult for us. Households are, you can say, another name for the consumers, which we are considering in macroeconomics particularly. So households are those who are living in houses, they are holding consumable goods or consumption goods with them, and they are consuming it. They need to hold their houses with the consumer goods. All right? And the firms are who are going to produce them for them. So let's see how the story begins. So starting the story, we are starting with the most simplest economy. This is the model of the most simple economy. Now the simplest economy starts that the households are going to provide factors of production. Okay, now this is surprising. How the households are going to provide factors of production. Factors of production are land, labor, capital, and entrepreneur. We know that they actually come from each home. I think this should be very clear that all the factors actually starts from one origin. They don't live in the firms, they live in their houses. So to produce the goods and services in the economy, they should start from coming from their homes. So from the households, the factors of production are supplied to firms. So we know that all the households or the factors of production actually comes into the firms, and these firms, when they are joined together, all these factors of production, what do they return? What do they make? They make goods and services. Basic economic, which we have been learning in our very first year. So factors of production are coming to the firms and they are making goods and services. And where do you think these goods and services should go in the flow? Yeah, they should go to the households. Obviously, the firms are making goods and services for the households. And when the firms needs to produce these goods and services, they need resources, the factors of production. And where do these factors of production are coming from? The households. If this is clear to you, the remaining flow would be very much understandable to you. So get ready. So these goods and services, when they're coming back to the households, what are they doing? They are going to make expenditure on them. These expenditures are usually known as consumption or consumer expenditures. Like the households, they are going to pay for the goods. This is what we all do in our daily life. We find the goods and services in the market, which are provided by the firms, and we are paying for that. That paying of the goods and services by the household is known as consumption expenditure or consumer expenditure. Now, these consumer expenditures, when they are done, where does that money goes now? Obviously, that goes to the firms. Now, what does the firm do? Does it keep it to themselves? No. Don't you think that they were given some services by the factors of production? Obviously. So they are going to return them some money. Like for the factors of production, if there was land, they were given the rent. If somebody has provided land in the shape of factor of production, they will be getting rents. If somebody has provided their physical and mental effort, that is labor, they'll be earning wages. Somebody is giving the capital, so they will be earning interest. And somebody who is as an entrepreneur has given his services is going to earn profits. So all these rewards are actually going back to the households. Why? Because the households, in the shape of factors of production, they eventually gave their services. So this is how they are paid. And this whole flow which is in before you is known as the output production or national output flow. And sometimes when we talk about the real term, that is the national income. So this is the national income that the whole nation is earning, and this is how it flows. So how the economy works, or in other words, how the goods and services are flowing in the economy, this is the flow of a simplest economy. A simple economy is one when there are households and there are only firms, and through their supply of the factors of production, they are making goods and services, making the consumer expenditure, the firms are able to pay them back. And this is how the goods and services and the money is flowing in the economy. Okay, so we are not living in the simple world, dear students. So we have two more economies ahead. And these two economies can be known as, if I just remove this simple economy, we are going to introduce the second type, that is closed economy. Why we call it closed? Now the closed economy is somewhere you need to increase the flow of this level of output. What would you do now? If you want to increase the flow in the economy, what would you do? For that, what we are going to do, the households, if they were making some consumer expenditures, when they want to grow more, if they want to produce more goods and services, this time they are going to start making some out of this flow, and they will start making savings. These savings are going to transform into investments. Okay? So these investments are going to turn back to the firms, and this time when they have investment, they have money from these savings, then they are going to again inject in this flow. This is going to be an injection in this flow, and this injection is going to increase more goods and services. Now, what is the saving and investment? You can have this question in your mind. Just imagine, as a consumer, when you are spending, you're going to save. When you're going to save, it means that you're saving in some financial institutions like banks or some other institutions which might be saving for you to give you some return. So these savings are actually transforming into investment. If you just recall the banking concept, that tells us that the banks actually works with your saving, and then they can lend the money to the firms. So this is happening over here now. That basic concept is helping us to understand that how the households are making savings, and these savings are turning into investment for the firms. And this is how in the closed economy, you can see the level of goods and services will increase. When they are going to increase, it's going to increase more rent, wages, interest, and profits. And this is going to increase the level of economic activity. So this closed economy is somewhere when the savings and investments are introduced. Now, these savings and these investments are also having a terminology. The savings and investment, let's discuss that in the later part. What are they actually? So the savings and investments, when we are discussed with the closed economy, we have the last option, that is the open economy. Now let's see, through the savings and investment, you have explored all the resources in the economy. Now you want to still increase more, because that is one of your economic objective, to increase the economic growth. And economic growth is linked with the level of goods and services that you produce. So if savings and investments have done their best part, what next you could do? You can have an open economy. When we talk about the open economy, we're talking about the international trade. Beyond your boundaries are open, and more trade is going and coming inside the more import and exports you're doing, and that is going to increase the level of output as well. So import and exports, international trade, let's see how do they actually work? Where do we fit them? So imports are actually, which is going to decrease this flow, because your level of goods and services are going, your money is going outside, and that is going to decrease the national output or national income. So we are going to show imports on this side. We can use sign of plus over here, because now this time the imports are adding with the saving, and exports we can add over this side. And we know though that when the exports are adding, this is going to give more goods and services. The more exports you do, the more money you get, the firms get, and the more goods and services you're capable to produce in an economy. But the imports, you are importing more goods, and that is going to reduce the national income in your economy. Okay, now since the open economy is there, now there is a need of one thing which has to be introduced at this level. That is also the part of open economy. And that open economy includes the government role. Now you can see, dear students, the saving and investments is something in the closed. When it's opening, then it means that you can introduce the international trade. With the international trade, now you can, or you have to introduce the role of the government. How could the government should remain behind, since it's also the part of the economic society? So for that, when you are consuming, you were saving, and when more income was coming, you were importing, and apart from that, your income should be now taxed. So I'm putting the taxes on this side of this flow. So the taxes, why we're putting it on this side? Since it's going to reduce the level of income or discourage the level of output. So taxes is going to be shown on this side. Now these taxes are going to convert into what? The government spending or expenses. When the government is going to tax people, from these taxes, the government is ought to make expenditures, and we know what expenditures do they have to do. They can do on the merit goods, they can do on the public goods, anything which is related to the well-being of its economy, to control the economy. Yes, they can do the government expenses. And when they're doing these government expenses, you know what is going to happen next. These government expenses are going to be paid to the firms, like they will ask the firms to make roads, street lights, and many other public or merit goods. And then again, more goods are coming into existence, into its being. And the more households get them, the more like spending, and this is going to increase the flow of the national income. So that's the complete model of the economies, dear students. So let's sum up right now how economy works. We started with the simplest economy, and we learned that how the flow of the goods and services is going on and how it should increase. It's going to be either by these three variables or either these three. Now, one of them is going to reduce the level of output in your economy, and some of them is going to increase the level of output in your economy. Now, let's guess how. If you're going to save more, you're less capable to produce things. But if you invest more, you're more capable, the firms will be more capable to produce more goods and services. Similarly, if you export more, if there is more injection of the exports in the economy, the more goods and services you see. But when there are more imports, the lesser goods in your country is going to be produced. And again, when your government is going to spend more on the economy, the more goods and services they can be produced. And if there are more taxes on your income, then there's going to be lesser output which can be produced. So shall we give them some names as well? Yes, these three are usually known as the withdrawals of the economy. These are all withdrawal. Why they are called withdrawn? They are withdrawal from this flow. Whenever we are going to put the taxes, the level, this flow is going to be affected. It's going to reduce. When there are going to be imports, it's going to be filled. When we are going to save more, it's going to be reduced. But when we are going to do government expenditure from these taxes, it's going to increase. When we are going to make more exports, if we are importing and then exporting at the same time, and if we are doing the savings and we have more investments, it's going to increase more. So if these are withdrawals, what are these three known as? They are known as injections in the economy. Okay, so this is all which we have learned before you. Now, before I go with the ending of today's lesson, I'm going to show you a slide, and it's a picture, and this can also be helpful. You can review that, and that can help you as well. So I'm coming on that side. I'm going to share a screen with you. This is one picture which is actually has been extracted from one of the books of economics, and it's pretty impressive to understand. So let's see, how do we understand? It is going to be the recap of or conclusion of all this lecture which we have done partially. It's going to take a little time, dear students, to see the screen share. So hang on, everyone, now. Okay, there we go. It's a perfect picture. You can see on the top there is the home, and on the bottom you can see there is a firm. Okay, now what does this picture tell us? Starting from the top, it's like consumers, individuals, firms, government. Now you can see what is happening. Like from the households, everybody, there is, if either it's an individuals, either it's firms, or either it's a government. They all are households as well. They are consumers as well, right? And the consumers, they are individual, firms, or government. So what are they doing first? So if we just see from the clockwise, the very first arrow comes down and giving us one space over here showing the supply of labor, land, and capital. All right. So these three or four, let's say, they are actually joining together as producers, private firms, or let's say public sector. This is the one they are mentioning us. They are all combining in the firms. And these firms are in return moving upward. You could see the total output. So the firms are receiving supply of land, labor, and capital, and they together they are making total output known as GDP or GNP, which we will learn in our next lesson as well. So the total output of goods and services is there, which is coming back to the consumers or in households. And what are in return they are doing? Now see the anti-clock. You can see the arrow coming down, showing the total expenditure on goods and services by the households. So it's returning back to the firms, and the firms in return are giving payments to the owners of the resources, the factors of production, just like in the diagram you have seen the rent, wages, interest, and profits. So these is known as the national income, which is coming back to the households, and this is how the national income of the economy flows. But in this diagram, I'm not showing you the injection and withdrawals. That is, I have explained on the board, which you could clearly see on the screen. And if there are any questions, you can definitely ask. In our next class, we are going to find it and relate it with those terminologies which we have in our syllabus. We will relate with them, and you will find it more easy to understand how these things help. So as an assignment, you can try this diagram at home, and this is the basic diagram which is going to tell you how the economy actually works. And this one phenomena is going to help you out throughout when we'll be studying macroeconomics, dear students. So that's it for today, and if there are any questions, you can raise hand or put your question in the chat box. So I will really like to answer your questions. So you have a nice day, and we are going to have a little break for a short time. Allah Hafiz.